My mom blocked me from visiting Grandma until Grandma sent me a letter that changed everything. My name's Mark, I'm 29, and I honestly never thought I'd be the guy writing a long rant on the internet about my own mother, but here I am. I live in Columbus, Ohio, in this small one-bedroom apartment near a grocery store and a strip mall that feels like it's been half dead for years. Most days are predictable. Coffee from my dented drip machine, a half-awake scroll through emails before work, and the same podcast playing while I try to beat traffic. The day everything happened started exactly like that. It was a gray Thursday in early fall, not cold yet, but heavy in the air, and my hoodie smelled faintly like detergent mixed with old coffee from yesterday. I had no idea that by the time I went to sleep that night, everything I believed about my family, especially about my mom, would feel different, and the person I thought was fading away was actually the one trying hardest to reach me. To understand the weight of the letter, you kind of need the background. My grandma on my mom's side, Evelyn, is 81. She's always been the closest thing to stability I had growing up. My parents fought constantly, money, schedules, resentment, everything, and my mom always framed herself as the one being disrespected, like it was a role she had to protect. But Grandma's place, a small house about an hour and a half south of Columbus, was the opposite. Her home always smelled like old books, fabric softener, and whatever she baked that day. She had a bowl of those strawberry hard candies that, for some reason, every grandma on the planet seems to own. Summers they're meant mowing her lawn, changing light bulbs she pretended she couldn't reach, and sitting beside her while she watched old game shows. It wasn't exciting, but it was familiar. And when you're a kid who'd rather be anywhere except the crossfire of your parents' arguments, familiarity is gold. The last couple of years, though, things shifted. My mom started talking about Grandma like she was unraveling, forgetting things, repeating stories, getting confused. At first it sounded normal for someone her age, but the tone changed. My mom would say Grandma didn't handle visitors well anymore, or that the doctor wanted her to have controlled stimulation, a phrase that sounded like something from a pamphlet. Every time I brought up stopping by for a weekend, my mom would shut it down fast. She'd say it wasn't a good day, or that Grandma wasn't up for company. She'd add in these passive-aggressive reminders that I didn't understand the burden she was carrying as the one taking care of her. It made me feel guilty, like I was being selfish even asking. I'm not pretending I'm some perfect grandson. I believed her, at least at first. Between my IT job, on-call rotations, rent climbing again, and just trying to keep my head above water, it was easier to assume my mom knew what Grandma needed. She'd occasionally text pictures, Grandma slumped in her recliner, TV glowing, blanket on her lap. She always looked exhausted in those photos, and my mom would send a caption like, "rough day," or "she barely ate." It painted the picture of someone too fragile to deal with visitors, and I didn't want to be the guy who stressed out an old woman who might not even fully recognize me. So I stayed away, told myself it was temporary, called her on birthdays and holidays. But the calls were always rushed, always on speakerphone with my mom in the room, and Grandma sounded so quiet, like she was trying not to take up space. I'd hang up and feel this dull ache in my chest, but I'd convince myself it was just aging. Then, about 6 months ago, my mom dropped the soft excuses and started flat-out blocking visits. If I brought up driving down, she'd get defensive instantly. She'd accuse me of not respecting boundaries, of disrupting her care plan, whatever that meant. One time, when I said I might just show up on a Sunday and bring groceries, she snapped that unannounced visits would make things worse. She said Grandma got agitated when her routine was broken. I hung up that day feeling like I was a kid again, being scolded for something I didn't understand. So I let it die out. I buried the guilt under work, takeout, and pretending everything was fine. I told myself that if Grandma really needed me, somehow I'd know. That Thursday morning didn't feel special at all. I was running late like usual, juggling a travel mug of coffee, my work laptop bag, and a half-zipped hoodie as I jogged down the stairs of my apartment building. The hallway carpet smelled faintly like burnt toast. Someone upstairs apparently has a gift for ruining breakfast. When I pushed open the front door, the outside air hit with that damp, chilly heaviness. As I walked past the mailboxes on my way out, something made me pause. I don't check my mail in the morning. Honestly, I'm the kind of person who lets envelopes pile up for days. But I stopped, shifted my coffee, and decided to check it for no real reason. The metal door squeaked when I opened it, and inside was a single envelope, shoved in just slightly too forcefully. It was a plain white envelope, no return address, a little wrinkled. My name was written across the front in shaky, uneven cursive. My full name, my apartment number, and the handwriting. It hit me before I even pulled it fully out. My grandma has this way of writing capital M's, round on top instead of sharp. Seeing that shape made something jolt in my chest. My first stupid thought was that my mom wrote it for her, but my mom prints in big block letters. This was Grandma's writing, just weaker. The envelope carried a faint smell, old wood, detergent, like her house. My hands suddenly felt unsteady. I didn't even walk back to my apartment. I just leaned against the tile wall near the exit, balanced my coffee on the ledge by the fire extinguisher, and opened the envelope with my thumb. The paper inside was folded neatly in thirds, lined paper from one of those cheap pads she always kept by her kitchen phone. The pen marks were pressed deep into the page, like she had to focus to keep her hand steady. At the top was my name, and then her words, handwritten, not dictated. I felt my throat tighten immediately. She wrote that she hadn't heard from me, without your mother standing in the doorway, and that the silence hurt. She said she was writing in secret because she didn't want trouble, which made my stomach drop. She asked if she had done something wrong, if I was angry, because I stopped visiting. As I kept reading, every line cut deeper. She asked about my job at the computer office, which made me smile a little because she never fully understood IT. She asked whether I still played guitar or if I'd given that up too, which made my chest ache. She wrote that my mom told her I was busy, that I didn't want to see her when she was like this. That last part made my hands shake. She underlined like this. She wrote that she didn't know what like this meant because she still felt like herself inside, even if her legs didn't work well and she forgot words sometimes. Toward the end, she mentioned something I'd never heard before, the house and the papers. She said she didn't trust everyone involved. Those 3 words, everyone involved, rang through my whole body. I don't know how long I stood there. People passed by me, neighbors heading to work, someone dragging a suitcase, but I felt frozen. My ears buzzed. The paper trembled between my fingers. Some of the ink was smudged, not fully, but enough that it looked like moisture had hit it. Maybe her hand. Maybe a tear. The last line was barely steady. If you still love me, please come see me without telling your mother first. That was it. No explanation. Just that request. Seeing the time on my phone, I knew I was going to be late for work. But pretending to troubleshoot printer issues while this sat in my pocket was impossible. I folded the letter, feeling the rough texture of the paper, the worn edges, and slipped it back into the envelope. I walked up to my apartment on autopilot, the stairwell filled with the scent of old dust and air freshener. Inside, I put the envelope on my tiny kitchen table next to a grocery list and stared at it while my heart pounded. I texted my boss a quick message saying I had a family emergency and needed the day. He responded with a thumbs up, which felt ridiculous compared to what I was feeling. Once work was handled, the instinct to clear things with my mom kicked in, even though I knew I shouldn't. I stood barefoot in my kitchen, cold laminate under my feet, phone in my hand, fridge humming loudly in the background. I typed, "Did Grandma send me a letter?" Her response came quickly, too quickly. She said she didn't know anything about a letter, that Grandma hasn't been writing much. The phrasing made my skin crawl. I didn't text back. Instead, I set my phone face down next to the envelope, grabbed my keys and a hoodie, and decided I was driving down. I didn't pack. I didn't think. I just knew that an 81-year-old woman my mom claimed was too confused to handle visitors had written me a secret letter asking me to come without telling her. That was enough. When I locked my apartment door, my hands felt clumsy. Downstairs, the parking lot was still damp. I saw my reflection in the car window, tired, pale, tense. On the drive, I kept the radio off. The sky stayed gray. The fields along the highway were dull and flat. Every few minutes I reached over to touch the envelope on the passenger seat, like it might disappear if I didn't keep checking. Memories kept hitting me, small ones, stupid ones. Grandma slipping me money as a teenager. My mom complaining that Grandma was ungrateful. The first time she told me not to visit too long. Each memory tightened something in my chest. When I finally turned onto Grandma's street, lined with old trees and wind chimes, my hands were shaking on the wheel. Her house looked exactly the same, faded blue siding, tiny marigolds clinging to life, the crooked mailbox. But in the driveway, parked crooked like someone pulled in too fast, was my mom's SUV. My stomach twisted instantly. I hadn't told her I was coming. But of course she was already there. When I stepped out of my car, the air felt heavier than it had on the drive, like the whole street was holding its breath. There was this faint smell of wet leaves mixed with the old wood from Grandma's porch. As I walked up the driveway, I noticed my mom's SUV was still running, engine ticking, like she'd either just arrived or was planning on leaving fast. The gravel near the porch had fresh tire marks scraped through it, which wasn't usual. Grandma's house always felt frozen in time, like nothing ever moved unless she moved it. Seeing those marks made my chest get tight. When I reached the steps, I could see the front door was pulled almost shut but not clicked into place, just barely open. It felt wrong instantly. Grandma was the kind of person who locked the door even when she was inside because she didn't want raccoons figuring out how to turn knobs. That tiny gap in the door was enough to make my pulse jump. I nudged the door open slowly, and the hinge made this creaking sound I'd heard 1,000 times growing up, but it didn't feel nostalgic at all. The living room smelled the same as always. Old books, laundry detergent, and that faint cinnamon scent from the air freshener she liked. But it felt different, almost disturbed. There was a small table by the recliner where she kept crossword books and her glasses, and one of the books was on the floor, flipped open like it had slipped or been knocked over. I stepped inside and called out softly, "Grandma." My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. No answer. Not even the usual shuffling sound she made when she tried to move around the house. But there was another noise, this muffled, tense voice from the back hallway. My mom's voice. It wasn't loud, but it had that sharp, clipped tone she used when she was trying not to yell. I followed the sound, heart pounding in my throat. The hallway lights were off, and the only illumination came from the kitchen window at the far end, casting thin strips of light across the wooden floor. As I got closer, I heard my mom say something like, "You're not understanding what I'm trying to do here," her voice low and tight. Then I heard Grandma's voice, weak, tired, but unmistakably hers, saying, "I just want to see him." That one sentence hit me so hard my knees almost buckled. Whatever my mom had been telling me about Grandma being too confused or too exhausted to handle visitors felt like a punch to the gut. She didn't sound confused. She sounded sad. Sad and cornered. Before I could think, before I could talk myself out of it, I stepped fully into the kitchen doorway. My mom's head whipped around so fast it actually startled me. She looked genuinely shocked, not the fake shocked expression she'd practiced my whole life when she wanted to guilt-trip someone. Her hair was pulled back messily, and she still had her work ID clipped to her shirt from whatever morning shift she'd come from. She stared at me like I was a stranger who had invaded her house, not her own son. Grandma was sitting at the table with a blanket over her legs, hands trembling, her reading glasses pushed slightly crooked on her face. When she saw me, her eyes widened with this mix of relief and confusion, and she tried to push herself up in the chair a little. "Mark," she whispered. My mom moved instantly, stepping between us like she was blocking a crime scene. She said, "What are you doing here?" in this controlled, icy tone that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I told her Grandma sent me a letter. Her expression changed fast, like she was trying to hide a reaction but didn't have enough time to mask all of it. Her lips tightened, and she inhaled sharply. She asked what letter, but she said it too quickly, like she already knew. Something about the way she stood there, arms rigid at her sides, body angled protectively but aggressively, made my stomach twist. I told her I wasn't doing this today, that I just wanted to talk to Grandma. I stepped forward just slightly, and my mom actually put her hand on my chest to stop me, which shocked me more than anything. Grandma spoke again, her voice shaking more now. She said, "Let him come in," almost pleading. My mom shot her this look, sharp, frustrated, almost angry, but then tried to smooth it out. She said Grandma was having an episode, and that I shouldn't feed into it. The room felt smaller with every word she said. My grandma wasn't having any episode. She looked tired, yes, but fully aware of what was happening. Her eyes locked onto mine, and there was something in them I hadn't seen before, fear, but also determination. It was like she was silently telling me not to leave. I could feel my heartbeat in my neck, loud and hot and unsteady. I stepped past my mom completely then, not shoving her, just walking. She tried to stop me again, but I didn't let her. I pulled out the envelope from my hoodie pocket and laid it gently on the table in front of Grandma. Her hands shook as she touched it, her fingers tracing the edge like she wasn't sure if it was real. My mom immediately said something like, "She didn't write that," but there was this noticeable waver in her voice she couldn't fully hide. I looked at my mom and asked her why she'd been lying to me for months about Grandma not wanting visitors. She said she wasn't lying, that Grandma gets confused, that I don't understand how hard this is. But her explanations didn't match the look on her face, or the way she kept glancing at the letter as if it was evidence she didn't want on the table. Grandma lifted the letter slightly, her hand shaking, and said quietly, "I wrote it." My mom's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. She tried to say Grandma didn't remember things clearly, but it sounded weak. Grandma looked at me then, eyes glossy, and said she missed me, that she thought I didn't want to come anymore. Hearing that out loud, in her own voice, broke something open inside my chest. I told her I never stopped wanting to see her. I told her I was told she didn't want visitors. My mom stepped forward then, saying something about not doing this right now, but her voice was getting higher, thinner. There was tension in the air that felt almost physical, like you could reach out and touch it. I pulled out a chair and sat next to Grandma. She reached for my hand, her fingers cold and papery, and I held them without thinking. She thanked me for coming. My mom let out this frustrated exhale that sounded almost like a growl. She kept pacing, rubbing her hands over her face, muttering things like, "You don't understand," and "I'm doing everything by myself." But none of it matched the situation unfolding. There on the table, half tucked under the envelope, was a manila folder with Grandma's name written on it in thick black marker. It wasn't fully closed, and from where I sat, I could see the corner of some paperwork peeking out, official-looking documents, signatures, dates. My mom noticed me looking at it and stepped forward quickly, sliding the folder away like it was something fragile or dangerous. She said it was just medical papers, nothing important. But she didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at Grandma. The silence between them said more than any explanation could. I asked what the papers were. My mom ignored the question completely and told me I needed to leave so Grandma could calm down. Grandma squeezed my hand harder. My mom's voice cracked when she said I was making things worse, and I realized she wasn't just angry. She was cornered. I stared at the manila folder, at my Grandma's trembling hands, at the tension in my mom's shoulders, and for the first time all day, a different kind of clarity started settling over me. Something wasn't just off, it was wrong. Deeply wrong. And whatever those papers were, my mom didn't want me seeing them. I didn't say anything right away. I just kept staring at the spot on the table where the manila folder had been. My mom shoved it against her chest with one arm, gripping the top as if I might lunge for it. The whole room felt tight, like the air didn't have anywhere to go. Grandma let out a shaky breath and said, almost to herself, "I didn't want trouble." That sentence stuck in my head the moment she said it. It wasn't the kind of thing she used to say. It sounded rehearsed, like something she'd been made to repeat. My mom shot her a look. This quick, sharp glance that wasn't angry so much as warning, and the temperature of the room seemed to drop. It was the same look my mom used to give me when I was a kid, and she didn't want me to talk in front of other adults. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my palms. I told my mom I wasn't leaving, not until I understood what was happening. She didn't yell, but her voice thinned out again, stretched so tight it sounded brittle. She said everything she was doing was for Grandma's sake, that she was the one handling all the appointments, all the paperwork, all the stress. And honestly, I would have believed her if not for the way she kept glancing at the folder like it was radioactive. She kept repeating that Grandma wasn't always aware of what she signed, that people her age can get confused. The words hit me wrong, like they were lines she'd said 100 times to other people. By the time she sat down heavily in the chair opposite us, rubbing her forehead with the heel of her hand, the only sound in the room was the refrigerator kicking on and the soft click of the kitchen clock behind her. Grandma tugged weakly at the blanket on her lap, folding a corner of it between her fingers. She whispered, "I know what I know," and the way she said it made something twist in my stomach. My mom muttered something about misunderstandings and timing, but she didn't finish any sentence fully, as if she was juggling too many lies at once and couldn't keep them straight anymore. I looked at Grandma and asked her quietly, "Is someone pressuring you?" My mom snapped up straight when I said that, her chair scraping loudly against the tile. She said I was manipulating the situation, which didn't even make sense. I wasn't the one hiding a folder. I wasn't the one blocking visits. I wasn't the one intercepting a letter. Grandma looked at the table instead of at either of us. Her voice was the softest I'd ever heard it when she said, "I didn't want to sign anything without you knowing." That sentence hit me with a cold rush. My mom immediately tried to cut in, saying Grandma didn't mean what it sounded like, that she'd been having memory lapses. But Grandma shook her head, slow but certain. She kept rubbing the folded edge of the blanket like she was grounding herself. My mom's breathing got uneven as she said something about financial responsibilities and preparing for the future, but the words floated around the room disconnected, flimsy. I asked her directly what she had Grandma sign. She froze. Completely froze. Not blinking. Not shifting. Just staring. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear a truck driving down the street outside. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Finally, my mom said Grandma needed help organizing things and wasn't capable of fully understanding her own finances anymore, so she took steps. When she said, "took steps," her eyes flicked toward the folder again. My grandmother didn't say a word. She just blinked slowly, as if the weight of everything had finally settled on her shoulders. The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead, giving the whole room a tired, washed-out feeling. My mom kept explaining in circles: guardianship, responsibility, simplifying decisions. All vague enough to mean nothing, but heavy enough to sound like something irreversible. I pushed my chair back, just enough to create space between us. My mom looked nervous for the first time all morning. She clutched the folder closer to her ribs. I told her she had no right to cut me out, to cut Grandma off from me, or to decide what Grandma understood without telling me. She said she was protecting Grandma from stress, and that I didn't visit enough to understand the full picture. But something in her tone had shifted from anger to fear. A real fear. The kind that comes when you know something is slipping out of your control. I stood up slowly, not to threaten her, but because I suddenly felt like I couldn't breathe sitting down. Grandma grabbed my hand again, holding tighter than I expected someone her age could. I asked Grandma if she wanted me to stay. She nodded once, small but clear. My mom exhaled hard, standing up abruptly like she was preparing to physically wedge herself between us again. She said I was making everything worse, that Grandma was going to get worked up, that I didn't know how fragile she was. But Grandma didn't look fragile in that moment. She looked exhausted, yes, but not confused. She looked like someone who'd been waiting for a witness. A moment later, she whispered, "I didn't want to lose the house." That line sent a cold rush down my spine. My mom stiffened instantly, her face losing all color for a second. She said, louder this time, that Grandma was mixing things up, that no one is taking anything. But the defensiveness in her voice told a different story. Something inside me snapped into place then, not anger exactly, clarity. I told my mom I was staying the rest of the day with Grandma, and that if she wanted to leave, she could. She sputtered, saying she wasn't leaving Grandma, alone with someone who doesn't understand her condition. I told her I wasn't going anywhere. My mom's eyes kept darting between my face and Grandma's, and for a second, I could see the panic behind all her rigid control. She said she had more errands and a call with the lawyer later. And the second those words left her mouth, I watched her face freeze again like she regretted saying them. She grabbed her keys off the counter with a shaky hand. The sound of the metal jangling echoed sharply. Grandma squeezed my hand one more time as my mom walked toward the door, folder still against her chest. She didn't say goodbye. She just muttered something about coming back later and closed the door behind her harder than she probably meant to. The sound reverberated through the house, making a picture frame on the wall rattle slightly. For a long moment, the only sound in the entire house was Grandma's breathing, wet, uneven, but steady. I sat back down next to her. She looked at the now empty space where the folder had been and then at me. She whispered, "I'm sorry," which broke something in me. I told her she didn't do anything wrong. She nodded slowly. Then she did something she hadn't done the entire morning. She relaxed her shoulders, just a little, like she'd been holding them tense for months. The house felt different with my mom gone, quieter, but not in a lonely way. More like something had uncoiled. On the table, next to the spot where the folder had been, was a small stack of unopened mail, including a couple of envelopes with official-looking seals. Grandma put her hand over them, almost protectively, and said, "I kept what I could." We spent the next couple of hours just talking. Not about legal stuff, I didn't push. We talked about her shows, her neighbor's ridiculous lawn ornaments, the cinnamon bread she liked but couldn't bake anymore. She ate half a sandwich while we talked, which she said was the most she'd eaten in days. She even laughed softly once when I told her about the stray cat that kept sitting on my car roof back in Columbus. The entire time, she kept her hand on the small stack of mail like she was keeping her grip on something real. I didn't dig into the details because I could tell she was still scared of saying too much. But she kept repeating variations of one thing. "I thought you forgot me." And hearing that was enough to make me realize the worst damage my mom had done wasn't about money or papers. It was isolation. Before I left that evening, I brought her water, straightened up the living room, and made a note of a few things around the house that needed repair so I could come back with supplies. When I hugged her goodbye, she held on to me longer than she ever had, her fingers trembling slightly against my back. She whispered, "I'm glad you came." And it felt less like a pleasantry and more like a release she'd been holding in for months. When I stepped outside, the air felt cooler, almost cleansing. My mom's SUV was gone. The sky was a flat, pale gray, and the street was completely quiet except for the soft rustling of leaves. I sat in my car for a few minutes, staring at the dashboard, feeling the weight of everything settle in. I didn't have all the answers, not even half of them. But I knew one thing for certain. My grandmother wasn't alone anymore. Driving back home, the envelope she sent me sat on the passenger seat where I could see it out of the corner of my eye. Every time the road curved, it slid slightly, the paper inside whispering against the cardboard like it was reminding me why I was there. I didn't feel angry anymore, not in the explosive way I had earlier. It was something steadier, something clear. I didn't know what my mom had been doing behind the scenes, or how bad it was, or how deep it went. But for the first time, I felt like I had stepped into the story instead of just believing the version someone else fed me. And that mattered more than I expected. When I got home, the apartment felt different somehow. Quieter. I put the envelope on my kitchen table, the same spot where I'd first opened it that morning, but now it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a turning point. I didn't know what the next weeks would look like. Lawyers, conversations, maybe even fights. But I knew that I was back in my grandma's life. And that was something my mom couldn't undo anymore. I sat down on my couch, still in my hoodie, feeling drained but grounded. There was a comfort in knowing that the person who needed me most had been waiting, and now she didn't have to wait anymore. No dramatic ending, no perfect resolution. Just this quiet sense that something had shifted in the right direction, even if everything else was still blurry. And honestly, that was enough.